Welcome back. I'm Richard Hosnaut. I'm your host for the Wisdom Inspired Life podcast with listeners in over 70 countries and hundreds of episodes, and this Wisdom Inspired Life YouTube channel. Today's episode builds on the previous one where we talked about ego. And here we're going to be talking about a very important aspects of the challenges with ego again, and how tools that you can use to manage the ego and make it a friend, not a foe. Okay? Here's the challenge. If you want to live a wisdom-inspired life, the path needs to go from being egocentric to wisdom. And wisdom is about being soul-centric. It's about being God-centric. Okay? The universe. Okay? But most of us today reside in a center built around the ego. And we need to manage it. And we need to, as you saw in the previous episode, eventually graduate. That comes much later in the process, but eventually that's what has to happen if we want to achieve self-realization, enlightenment, whatever you want to call it. So we need to make your ego a positive, constructive capability. So how do we do that? Well, there's good news here. We're going to talk about creating a more caring and compassionate relationship with your fellow human beings by better managing your emotions. Okay? How are we going to do that? Well, I am a big fan of Daniel Goleman's Emotional Intelligence. You see his #1 best-selling book here, the groundbreaking book that redefines what it means to be smart. Absolutely right, and why it can matter more than IQ. We'll talk about that more in a moment. To manage emotions, we need emotional intelligence. Now, Daniel Goleman, to be clear, is not the only one that talks about emotional intelligence and has written about it. As in most of the episodes here, I talk about what I'm most familiar with. I am familiar with it. There are other people that talk about and write about very knowledgeably and very beneficially about emotional intelligence. So I'm not trying to suggest this is the one and only source, but it's the source, as I said, I know best. The strongest personality or ego capability to optimize the strengths and positives of your ego is emotional intelligence. It's a research-based understanding of both traits and abilities. And Daniel Goleman, through his #1 best-selling book, really popularized EI, or what, as it's more commonly known, EQ, as contrast with IQ. Okay? So, there's a whole bunch of positives if you can have a high EQ with positive outcomes. Research says that high EI or EQ delivers greater mental health, job performance, and leadership skills. It really does. This has been around a long time, and people have gotten really skilled at it. Daniel Goleman indicated that emotional intelligence accounted for 67% of the abilities deemed necessary for superior performance in leaders and, I'll add, in life, and mattered twice as much as technical expertise or IQ. Hear that again. Emotional intelligence, when it comes to achieving superior performance in work and in life, mattered twice as much as technical expertise and IQ. As you may know from my background, I spent many decades in and around business, major businesses, and my own personal testimony is those with the highest levels of emotional intelligence absolutely were the top performers. Now, some studies show a positive correlation between emotional intelligence and career success. Actually, there's many. Here's what's interesting. While IQ in these same research studies tends to have no correlation with success or a negative correlation. Now, if you've ever, and I want to be careful what I say here because it's not a sweeping comment, but there are, some of us have had, and I have had, experiences with a high IQ person. And some of them, not all of them, can know their high IQ and think they're smarter than anyone else. And that's a problem because it closes the door for them to be open to new thinking and new ways of doing things. which is absolutely necessary for success in life and work. So that's one of the reasons that there can often be a negative correlation with IQ. Okay. Now let's get to some Daniel Goleman quotes. Empathy is the fundamental people skill. You may recall in an earlier episode on servant leadership, followed up by empathetic listening, how much emphasis I put on the importance of empathy. Empathy is understanding what another person is experiencing, feelings, emotions, logical feelings, frustrated anger, all that sort of stuff. Okay. Next, self-awareness. Not a word I've used, I think, before in this, but critically important. Self-awareness from Goleman. Recognizing a feeling as it happens is the keystone to emotional intelligence. And becoming aware as feelings are happening. Am I frustrated? Am I happy? Am I exhilarated? Am I distracted? What are you feeling? Being aware, self-aware. Monitor yourself. Observe yourself. Observing, the ability to observe yourself is a great spiritual capability also. Okay? Goleman says, the first step is self-awareness, catching the worrisome episodes as near to their beginning as possible. In other words, before anger or frustration or something gets expressed, being self-aware and catching them before as soon as possible. Ideally, as soon or just after a fleeting catastrophic image triggers the worry-anxiety cycle. Okay? Self-awareness is critically important. Now, my perspective on this is that there are various stages of self-awareness. And the first is that you become self-aware, much later after an event. You go, boy, I was pretty upset. Yeah, now that I think about it and replay it, I was pretty upset. And you learn something from that. Could I have done something differently? The next level of self-awareness is immediately after something happens. You go, oh, had I just thought this through a little bit better, I would have done something differently. The next level is actually planning for an event. You're going to meet and talk with someone. Be aware in the planning stage how you're feeling about this. You're feeling cautious, you're feeling scared, you're feeling like you might be intimidated, you're feeling like this might go extremely well. Just be aware. As you're planning for an event, what are you feeling? Bringing into the event before it actually happens. And then there's real-time self-awareness. Now, this isn't just self-awareness for the sake of observing. It's observing and saying, I'm feeling frustrated. Can I make a different choice of how I'm feeling here? This might not go well if I continue to be frustrated. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. It's called reframing. Okay? So, self-awareness, very, very important. Emotional intelligence. Let me talk just a little bit more about empathy, and I could talk a lot more about empathy. Goleman again, empathy builds on self-awareness. See how the two come together? Okay? The more open we are to our emotions, the more skilled we will be in reading feelings. Okay? Being self-aware not only of yourself, but being self-aware of observing the other person, your own emotions. Okay? Being able to put aside one's self-centered focus and impulses has social benefits. Get that. Putting aside one's self-centered, me, self-centered focus and impulses has social benefits. It opens the way to empathy, to real listening, to take another person's perspective. Empathy, as we have seen, leads to caring, altruism, and compassion. Now, this should sound familiar. Going back to servant leadership, what did we talk about? Serving the needs of others, being caring and being compassionate. In the next episode, we talked about empathetic listening, all about real listening to the other from the other person's perspective. So you can see how servant leadership, empathetic listening, listen to learn, and emotional intelligence form a very powerful set of skills that you can focus on in your life to bring about positive transformation. Good stuff. Okay, not so good stuff. Managing anger. Goleman says, he actually shares this Ben Franklin quote, which is, Ben was a very wise guy. Ben said, anger is never without a reason, but seldom a good one. Isn't that wise? Goleman says, the train of angry thoughts that stokes anger is also potentially the key to the most powerful ways to diffuse anger. Understanding the convictions that are fueling the anger in the first place. Why are you angry? Okay. Research has found that reframing a situation more positively was one of the most potent ways to put anger to rest. For example, you're listening to someone, you're getting angry, self-aware, I'm getting angry. Is there a way out of this? Am I seeing this right? Maybe I should listen longer. Maybe I should ask some questions before I get angry to learn a little bit more. See how you can reframe that anger while it's in the process of developing. Last piece of perspective on this for me. Anger is so destructive personally and to relationships that anger management, that's another term we know a lot about, is a critical skill if you want to lead a wisdom-inspired life. There is not room in a wisdom-inspired life for anger. Okay? So, let me deal with one other challenging and real negative experience, which is managing depression. Depression blocks the path to wisdom with negative energy. Wisdom is about the most positive of positive energy. Opening the path, getting out of depression, requires a tremendous amounts of positive energy. And I don't want anything that I'm saying in just this one page dealing with depression to suggest that depression is easy. It isn't, okay? But it is something that needs to be dealt with, okay? Goleman says one of the most potent antidotes to depression is seeing things differently or cognitive reframing. In other words, the set of assumptions that have led to you being depressed, examine those assumptions and see if there is another way of looking at them that maybe you've misinterpreted, misunderstood, that can help you start getting out of it. Also, anxiety undermines the intellect. Okay? Now, go back to the episodes on meditation. What are some of the proven benefits of meditation? It helps significantly with depression, reducing both the incidence and the intensity of depression, and anxiety and panic attacks. Meditation is very effective at doing that. Okay? Now, again, this is not meant to be a comprehensive discussion of depression, what it is, and everything that you can do about it. I'm going to leave you with a challenging thought to reframe this about depression. Overcoming depression can often start with something as easy as a smile. I ask you, I challenge you, when you are feeling in a negative place, force bringing a smile onto your face, and then be self-aware enough to see how that simple act, that physical act of smiling, can begin a positive transformation. Okay, let's turn to something extremely powerful and positive, leaving anger and depression behind. And again, I'm going to touch on a very powerful topic here in a short way. This is something that there's a lot more you can learn about. Quoting from Goleman, we're talking about the power of being in flow, okay? Being able to enter flow is emotional intelligence at its best. Flow represents perhaps the ultimate harnessing of emotions on the service of performance and learning. Amen. In the flow of emotions are not just contained and channeled, but positive, energized, and aligned with the task at hand. The hallmark of flow is a feeling of spontaneous joy and even rapture. Flow is a state of self-forgetfulness. They lose all self-consciousness. Flow is an extremely powerful emotional intelligence state. It is one that I'm fortunate to be able to experience and bring into my life with some significant frequency. And everything I've just said here, quoting Goleman, I would put exclamation marks behind. Okay? As you may know, I also work in the field of innovation and creativity. And there's no place where flow can be more powerful and productive than in the areas of innovation and creativity, where you open yourself up to new possibilities. Flow, as I say here, is associated with high levels of creativity and openness to new possibilities. And that openness to new possibilities is one of the critical things that can help you start living a wisdom-inspired life. Now, the flow, there's some great writings on this, and there's a guy whose name is like 20 letters long, begins with a C, and you can go check that out, who's written a very comprehensive book on the topic if you want to know more about it. But it's, as Goleman says, it's emotional intelligence at its best. Now, being in flow, athletes often talk about it as being in the zone, you know. Hitters go on these great streaks. They don't know what they're doing. They're just, and it at its heart, it involves a high level of self-awareness, but also being very, very present, not distracted by the past, not anticipating the future, but being very present. Okay, so flow, very powerful, the best of emotional intelligence. So managing emotions is important. They can often define and control the ego's actions. And the ego is a critical guidance system in many ways, connected with knowledge and intellect. Out of control negative emotions are toxic in life, derailing good intentions and inspiring goals. You don't want that. Okay? Developing emotional intelligence is the best known, proven method to diffuse negative emotions and nurture positive emotions. It's opening the pathway to a wisdom-inspired life. Now remember the package of servant leadership, empathetic listening to learn, meditation, emotional intelligence, all these things that we've been covering up until now, all work together to help bring about the positive change that's necessary to start opening the pathway to intuition, which is the pathway to wisdom. And the pathway to wisdom enables you then start living a wisdom-inspired life. As if it were that simple, listening to this short episode. What I'm trying to do here is give you some bits and morsels that you can engage and maybe go out and learn more and start using in your life. I'm not meant to be a comprehensive everything you could know. Okay? Hopefully I've inspired you a bit to learn more, because these are powerful tools. Okay? As I've said in a couple of other episodes, my journey is kind of captured in an autobiographical book, My Wisdom-Inspired Life, A Provocative True Story. It's available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle versions. As I've said before, I sell it for the minimum price to not make a loss. So I make 25, 50 cents a book, maybe, I think. I know Amazon makes money. So it's, again, this is a pathway that I've taken. It's not necessarily yours by any stretch, but it'll give you a sense of what at least one person has done. Well, we're on a journey, and I appreciate you being with me today on this journey, and I look forward to continuing the journey with you.